If I was disabled, I'd have to think about some things that able-bodied people don't. So I wouldn't know whether an institution was really accessible or not, because as an able-bodied person, I don't have to think about that. That's privilege. For those of us who are white, knowing that when we apply for a job, answer a question in a classroom, raise our hand, that we're not sweating, confirming a negative stereotype about our intelligence. Because what are those? There are none about white intelligence as white folks. Unless we're applying for a job that involves jumping or dancing, what the hell stereotypes are we up against? But people of color face stereotypes every day about ability, intellect, work ethic, law-abidingness, or the decided lack thereof. That is a privilege to not have to sweat that. It's a privilege to know that no matter what other white people do, it won't stick to me. So if 19 Arab Muslims fly planes into buildings, every single person who either is named Muhammad or follows a prophet of that name is in a heap of trouble right about now. But if Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols do their thing, it doesn't stick to me. If the Unabomber, crazy-ass white man in the woods of Montana, blowing up people for 20 years before they caught him, it doesn't stick to me. Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bar bomber, plants a bomb in an Olympic Village in Atlanta in '96, blows up a gay bar, blows up a family planning clinic, and then he too runs off to the woods. By the way, I have no idea what it is about white folks in the woods. But whatever it is probably explains why black folks don't do a hell of a lot of camping. That's privilege. It's privilege that other white people can demonstrate incompetence and it won't stick to other white people. Here's the final example of white privilege that we need to be clear about, and then I promise I'm done. But it's early, and I didn't get a lot of sleep. I'm just trying to wake up. And this is going to sound politically partisan. I don't mean for it to. I assure you that no matter who the president of the United States was at any given moment, I would make fun of him. I've been doing it since 1974 when I was 6 and it was Nixon, so I see no reason to stop now. But it just so happens you're here today, and I'm here today. The President of the United States, well, he's who he is today, and for several more months, and so I'll just talk about him. We have a president who, by his own admission, this is how I know it's not cruel, he would admit it with that smirk of his. A president who, by his own admission, no matter what you think of his policies or him as an individual human being and an individual expression of God, no, really. No matter what you think of him as a person or his policies, he is, let us say, not the most articulate soul in the world. This is an understatement of somewhat biblical proportions. Mispronounces words my 4-year-old has no trouble with, makes up other words that don't exist in any dictionary to be found on the planet. And we laugh about it, we make fun of it, books get written about it, but none of us who are white, when we see him do that, when we see him mangle the language of his birth and rearing, we know it's not going to stick. We don't sit there and go, come on, man. They're never going to vote for another white guy, because they will. That's the problem. But if a person of color were to mangle that language, it'd be a whole different ballgame. The president gets up last September in front of school children and teachers in Brooklyn, New York, to defend No Child Left Behind. And during the course of his speech, he says the following, direct quote: if we set high standards and we measure results, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, children's will learn. You know, children's, the plural of children. And he says it in front of a bunch of children's, and they're all like, and the teachers are like, shh, shh, hand over the heart, hand over the heart. We'll talk about it later. If Barack Obama says children's will learn, he's finished. If any person of color mispronounces a word or mangles the language that way, they're done. And you know it's true, because God forbid you're a person of color who speaks the language well. Someone will point it out like it's a freaking miracle. My goodness, all these Asian brothers and sisters I meet around the country, the third generation in this country, so they speak English pretty well. And someone inevitably will come up to them. They'll tell me these stories all the time. Someone will come up and hear them and they speak English well because they're like from here. And they'll say, my, you speak the language so well. Where are you from? St. Louis? No. Like, where are you really from? St. Louis. No. Then we get louder because we think they can't hear well, in addition to not being very smart. And we say, no, where is your family from? Kansas City. Can we stop this ridiculous charade? Right? But that's what it is to never know that you belong. To be a person of color, no matter how long you've been here, is to never be able to take your belonging for granted. When you ask me where I'm from and I tell you Nashville, you're satisfied with that. You don't say, no, I'm talking about what part of Scotland. because you take for granted this is my country, like the Chevy commercial said. This is our country as the truck drives off from the ranch. You can think about the symbolism of the commercial and what it means or doesn't mean. My point being that unless we're prepared to handle and discuss these notions of belonging, when I say the term all-American boy or all-American girl, you know the image that comes into the mind of most people. It's not a multicultural image. It's not Barack Obama, who is as American as anybody. It's not indigenous people who were here first. It's not Mexican folk, half of whose country got jacked in a war of aggression that we started, who were here, and now when they try to come home, we try to kick them back across an artificial border and tell them they're illegal. Now, if I come into your house and put your stuff on the lawn, and then you try to put it back, how is it you're the criminal? How does that work? That's what we've done in this country. We've spun a narrative that is based in mythology, and it's harming every single one of us, because I got news for you. When we believe that narrative, when we believe that lie, when we believe that notion that we're this shining city on a hill, the last great hope for the world, we're not prepared for the anger that's coming our way. We're not prepared for 9/11. We're not prepared for it because we don't think anybody can do anything to us because we're big and bad, and privilege says, if you mess with us, we will jack you up, man. We spend $400 billion a year on defense. We'll put you back in the Stone Age because we can, man. And then 19 guys with some box cutters, $10,000 worth of plane tickets, and a bad attitude pretty much said, okay, cool. You can spend your $400 billion a year on defense. Me and my boys are still bringing these buildings down. How do you like us now? And then the privileged among us were shocked. Everybody was upset, everybody was scared, everybody was angry. It was a horrible, horrible, unjustifiable thing. But people of color weren't stunned. People of color know what it is to be terrorized, to be hunted, to be hated. The only difference on 9/11 for some folks was that it didn't come from across the railroad track, it came from across the ocean. That was different, but nothing else was. But white folks were running around saying, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? Because privilege said you never had to know. Privilege said you could stay in that bubble of ignorance, that bubble of unreality, and you'd be safe. Guess what? Not safe. So ultimately, this system of inequality leaves us all ill-prepared for reality. That's not a good place to be. It's not a healthy place to be. So we as white folks have a stake in changing this. It isn't about trying to change it on behalf of people of color to save them. If that's our motivation as white people for speaking out against racism, we should find another vocation, find another hobby, take up finger painting. We need to do it to liberate ourselves from the mental straitjacket that we find ourselves in, because you see, there's a difference between being in this skin and being of this skin. We are in it, and over that we have never had control, but we are not of it. We are made of better and more important stuff than that. We are made of the same stuff that made John Brown, the same stuff that made Angelina Grimke, the same stuff that made John Fee and Ellsbury Ambrose and Bob and Dottie Zellner, the same stuff that made Helen Hunt Jackson, the same stuff that made Carolyn Daniels. And if you don't know these names, it is only because these white anti-racist heroes and sheroes and allies that have stood shoulder to shoulder with people of color have been written out of history, to keep us from knowing that we have a different path, that we have an alternative tradition to which we can connect. Because if young white people don't realize that they have a choice, if young white people don't realize that they don't have to go along, that they don't have to remain silent, that they don't have to collaborate with injustice, if we know that, we become dangerous. We become radical, we become revolutionary, we become divisive. But we need to connect to that history. Because the blood and the history that flows through those of us in this room who are of European descent is not only the blood and history of slave owners, but also of abolitionists. It is not only the blood and the history of lynch mobs and those who stood around while black people were strung up from trees, bodies burned, limbs cut off and sold for souvenirs. It is not only the blood and history of those lynch mobs, but it is the blood and history of those who were freedom riders. It is our choice as to which history we will connect with. It is our choice as to which tradition we will fall in. And I assure you, if we take our rightful place in that as allies, we can create a political culture in which presidential candidates can speak the truth and not be punished for it. But that is your job, and that is my job. So as James Baldwin said, the world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as it was when you came in. Thank you very much, and God bless.